Meanwhile, the United States has officially removed Uganda from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, ending Kampala's ability to export certain commodities to the United States duty-free. Uganda joined 3 other African countries such as the Central African Republic, Gabon and Niger Republic, becoming the 4th country to be non-beneficiary of the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act effective from January. U.S. President Joe Biden in October said that Uganda's removal from AGOA was due to the gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. President Biden also noted that the 4 countries had failed to address United States concerns about their non-compliance with the AGOA eligibility criteria, adding that he had determined they do not meet the requirements necessary to allow them to continue benefiting from the trade deal. Let's bring in African Affairs analyst Ibrahim Anoba, who joins us from the University of California. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Joker. Nice to be with you.
Right, so Ibrahim, first, are you surprised by this move? What's your assessment of the situation?
Well, it's quite unfortunate and an embarrassing sanction because you critically look at it. Who is the sanction targeting? First of all, the bill that the U.S. is condemning here was developed by President Yoweri Museveni and his cabinet members, of course, pushed by politicians in the National Assembly, in Uganda's parliament. So if those are the people at fault here, why then will you impose an economic sanction that will be to the detriment of the people, the Ugandan people, that America is so obsessed about their human rights here? And all said and done, President Museveni, it's not like he has an election to win, or the parliamentarians that pushed this bill. It's not like they have an election to win as well. They will be better off. They are not really bothered. It is the people in Uganda that their livelihood will be so much affected here. So it's a misplaced sanction. If you want to sanction, you target the people at the top, not the general public.
Right, so let's expand it further. You've just said that, this may do nothing for Mr. Yoweri Museveni and, the lawmakers that push for this bill. And it's the people that it's going to affect. So what does this mean exactly for the Ugandan economy? How much hurt is this going to create?
Well, it's going to be quite, it's going to have quite a few consequences. First, you have to understand that Ugandan economy in the last few years has had unemployment gradually increase. In 2013, the unemployment rate was about, I think, 1.9. And now it's about 4.3, 4.5 in 2021. What this means is that there has been a steady increase in unemployment rate in the country. And should there be any radical economic shock, the rate of unemployment could drastically increase, which, of course, Uganda doesn't want. So that is one thing to watch for. But also you have to understand that Uganda's largest export to the U.S. is coffee, vanilla, agricultural products. And agriculture itself employs about 68% of Uganda's labor force, which is tied to about 11% of its GDP, which means if the agricultural sector gets to be affected, then that could have a bad consequence on employment generally in the country. So that's my number one concern for Uganda.
And what about the U.S.? You just listed some of those things that Uganda exports to the U.S. I suppose that they might not be the only country, getting those across the seas to the United States. But I mean, an aspect of that has been cut off with a sanction. So how is this going to affect those people that were actually getting shipments from Uganda for those products?
Well, I do know quite a few people who are Ugandans who massively benefit from these agreements. I mean, it's been in place since 2000, 23 years ago. So some people's business has been primarily structured around AGOA. But that being said, it's not going to pretty much affect the U.S. anyways, because what's the U.S. import from Uganda the most? Coffee, vanilla. It can always get those from Brazil, Colombia, and vanilla from Indonesia. So it's not really bothered about Uganda. However, the critical thing here is the hypocrisy of the US government. Remember, when this agreement was put in place in 2000, there were gross violations of human rights in Uganda. President Museveni has been in power since 1986. A huge part of that time in power has had record of human rights violation. In 2020, just about 3 years ago, there was a massacre in Uganda. About 54 people died. These were opposition political supporters, and thousands of people were jailed. In 2020, America did not state it was going to remove Uganda from the list then. So why now? Why with this homosexuality bill? Well, it gives the impression that America is particularly concerned about certain human rights, not just all human rights. The same American government that is supporting regime change, genocide across the world, is one that seems to be having this moral ground, pushing it on African countries. Of course, we know that the homosexuality bill is appalling. It has to be thrown out by the Ugandan government. But the US shouldn't seem to claim a morality high ground over African countries here. So it's not going to be an economic problem for the US to remove Uganda. However, it shows some level of hypocrisy.
So be that as it may, what can African countries do to be in charge of their own affairs without fear of offending developed nations? Certainly the US is the bigger power here, as you've just stated.
That's true. So this shows that our governments across the continent needs to focus more inwardly. We have the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreements, which is pushed to be a game changer. It's going to change the economic fortune of Africa. So we need to trade internally with ourselves. Uganda needs to look more towards just beyond Kenya and Uganda and look at other neighboring countries with whom to trade. Unless priority should be given to the US or any European trade partners. Because again, if you are trading more with your African colleagues, when such sanctions as the US is pushing now comes up, you're going to have less vulnerability to it. So it's a wake-up call. But it's also necessary for us to tell Uganda that this is an example of what you're going to get if you keep being a gross violator of human rights. We know the case of Bobby Wine, the opposition leader who has been persecuted for many years by President Yoweri Museveni. Uganda is currently ranked 123 out of 165 countries on the Human Freedom Index. 123 out of 165. That's a poor class performance. So we can't really neglect the fact that Uganda has been a bad haven for human rights, for civil rights societies, civil rights organizations in the last 2 decades or whatnot. However, it's time for us to focus on internal trade, AFCFTA, and also remind Uganda that this is the kind of attitude you're going to get if it's continuing to violate human rights.
Right. And finally, to you, this is just the beginning of 2024. We're just, trying to finish the first week of the new year. African presidents, African leaders, what should be our priorities going into the new year on the back of the fact that, we just spoke about managing our own affairs and not being, fearful of bigger powers. But what are the things that we should be prioritizing aside the one that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so that's a very relevant question, Joke. So we saw in last year that coups were just pretty much one of the most predominant problems we had to deal with in Africa. I mean, ECOWAS was pretty much being condemned for the way it handled the coup in Niger, and he aimed generally for other coups on the continent. But we now know that coups just do not happen overnight. That is a culmination of different economic and political instabilities that comes together to push the military into power. So if we can focus on one, respecting the dignity and human rights of our citizens, starting with Uganda and others, then that's going to solve one part of the problem. But also economic reforms that start with fixing corruption and having more open trade internally, respecting entrepreneurs on the continent, and just not throwing them in jail or condemning them because they disagree with you politically or because they are not from your region. That's part of the reasons why President Museveni has been floated as a dictator on the continent for many years, because he seems to be concerned about a particular set of Ugandans that are the proper citizens, and some other Ugandans like Bobby Wine or the so-called homosexuals are not proper citizens. And that is not a way to govern your country. If you do not want to have a military coup, if you don't want to have a political instability or sanctions, you should respect the dignity of your people. And Uganda is pretty much a case in point for the rest of the continent.
Right, Ibrahim, thank you for your time today.